Hey everyone, thanks for joining. I'm Greg, and in each episode, we'll explore the spending plan of a household through the eyes of three financial experts, Dave Ramsey, the Money Guys, and Ramit Sethi. I'm not a financial expert, I'm just a guy with some spreadsheets and a calculator. Welcome to Money Month. Today, we're going to revisit the spending plan of a couple in their early 40s from Ohio with 2 children. Let's get started. Okay, couple from Ohio, let's review your spending plan. Your assets are $171,000, investments $25,000, emergency fund $300, pre-planned savings $0, high interest debt $20,000 comprised of credit card debt, low interest debt $158,000 comprised of a $100,000 mortgage, a $45,000 student loan, and $13,000 car loan. Your gross monthly income is $7,500, net monthly income $5,500. Your mortgage is $900 per month, groceries $900, credit card $535, student loan $475, car loan $480, water $60, electricity $100, gas $50, trash $90, internet $190, phone $240, insurance $550, transportation $500, clothes $100, subscriptions $80, for a total fixed cost of $5,250. For investments, you have $250 in pre-tax retirement savings, $0 for post-tax retirement savings, $0 for health savings account, for an investment total of $250. You have $0 for savings goals and $0 for guilt-free spending. Last episode, we looked at this spending plan through the eyes of the Money Guys. This episode, let's see what Ramit Sethi would say about this. On his podcast and in his book, Ramit Sethi emphasizes the importance of allocating certain percentages of your net income to different spending categories. Ramit recommends that fixed costs should be about 50 to 60% of your net income. Investments should be 10 to 15%. Savings should be 5 to 10%, and guilt-free spending should be 20 to 35%. This is the most distinctive part of his approach when compared to the approach of Dave Ramsey and the Money Guys. His thinking is that if you get these percentages right, then everything else will fall into place. If your fixed costs are higher than 60%, then you'll probably feel financially stressed, like money is too tight, and that you need to live paycheck to paycheck. And if your investments are too low, then you're not setting yourself up for a rich life when you retire. If your savings percentage is too low, then you won't have anything to fall back on when an emergency comes or when a future expense arrives. So you may be tempted to incur credit card debt, which is not the path to a rich life. And lastly, if your guilt-free spending percentage is too low, then you may not be enjoying your life all that much, and you may never learn the skills of how to spend money. So let's see where you are with all of these percentages. Your fixed costs are 95% of your net monthly income. You only have a $300 emergency fund, so if you lost your job or had a costly emergency, you would be in big trouble. I've heard Ramit say that you should attack problems with overwhelming force. So with that in mind, I think he would suggest doing whatever you can to bring these fixed costs down to 60%. Look at each of your fixed costs and see if there's any way they can be reduced enough to get it down to 60%. 60% of $5,500 would be $3,300. Currently, your fixed costs are $5,250, so you would need to decrease your fixed costs by almost $2,000. That's an enormous amount to cut from your fixed costs. Similar to Dave Ramsey and the Money Guys, I think Ramit would suggest you cut your grocery spending by $200 per month and remove your spending on clothes and subscriptions. If you made those 3 changes, that would free up $380 per month and bring your fixed costs down to 89%, which is still too high. In the previous 2 episodes, this was the extent of the changes that we made to your fixed costs. Dave Ramsey and the Money Guys may have advised you to make more drastic changes as well, but while their plans are clear as to the sequence of steps you should take, they're less clear about what percentage you should spend on fixed costs. Since Ramit is very clear on what you should spend on fixed costs, in this episode, let's see what would happen if you made some even more drastic changes here to get your fixed costs as close to 60% as possible. First, let's look at your mortgage. While it's only 12% of your gross monthly income, well under the recommended max of 25%, Ramit might suggest running the numbers to see what would happen if you sold your home. Could you live anywhere cheaper? Could you stay with relatives or friends for a while and drastically reduce your housing costs, water, electricity, gas, trash, and internet? It's a drastic change, but you only have $300 in your emergency fund, so if you lost your job or had a costly emergency, it's a change you might be forced to make. And it's always better to make those kinds of decisions when you can look at your options with a clear head instead of in a state of panic when you're backed in a corner. Moving on, your phone bill is also pretty high. Can you switch to a cheaper plan? Likewise, can you shop around for a cheaper insurance policy? And is there any way you can reduce your transportation costs? On that note, your car loan is one of your highest fixed costs. Can you sell your car and buy the cheapest vehicle that will safely get you to your job and back? Let's see what it would look like if you made all of these changes, reducing your housing costs, groceries, utilities, insurance, transportation, limiting spending on clothing and subscriptions, and you traded in your car for a paid-for vehicle. After making these changes, I was able to get your fixed costs down to 65%, which is going to have to be close enough for now. Keep in mind that once your credit card and your student loan are paid off, your fixed costs will drop below 60%. Now let's look at your other spending categories and your percentages. Your investment percentage is 5% of your net monthly income, $250, which is below Ramit's suggested range of 10 to 15%, $550 to $825. Since you have credit card debt, I think Ramit would recommend getting this to the minimum percentage of 10% while you're paying off that debt. After the credit card debt is paid off, you could increase this to 15% or greater. We'll revisit that in a minute. For now, let's go with 10%. In his book, I Will Teach You to Be Rich, Ramit recommends a similar sequence of investing allocations that Dave Ramsey and the Money Guys recommend. First, invest enough to get your employer match, then max out your Roth IRA, then max out your pre-tax retirement plan, then max out your health savings account if you have access to one. And if you still have money left over, then put it in a regular non-retirement taxable investment account. As I said before, 10% of $5,500 is $550, so you have $550 to invest. For the employer match, let's assume it's $100, so now you have $450 left to invest. For maxing out your Roth IRA, you'd have to look up what the limits are, but in 2024, if you're under age 50, you can contribute $7,000 for the year, which is about $583 per month for 12 months of contributions. Adjust that as necessary if you're starting later in the year. You only have $450 left to invest, so you would put all of that into your Roth IRA. Once you've set up that account, invested the $450 per month into a low-cost fund, and automated a recurring payment into that fund, then you're done with investing for now. For savings goals, Ramit recommends allocating 5 to 10% of your net monthly income, which would be $275 to $550. Your savings goals percentage is 0% of your net monthly income, which is below Ramit's suggested range. Since you have credit card debt, I think Ramit would recommend getting this to the minimum percentage of 5%, $275, while you're paying off that debt. After the credit card debt is paid off, you could increase this to 10%, $550 or greater. We'll revisit that in a minute. And since your emergency fund is only $300, I'm going to assume that this $275 per month should go towards that. Ramit often says he wants you to live a rich life both in the future and today, spending extravagantly on the things you love and cutting back on things that aren't important to you. To start living your rich life today, his recommended percentage for guilt-free spending is 20 to 35% of your net monthly income, which would be in the range of $1,100 to $1,925. You currently have nothing going towards your guilt-free spending. Ramit would definitely recommend increasing this, but you only have $1,085 left to spend, which means you wouldn't be able to reach the minimum 20%, $1,100. Not only that, but if you used all of the $1,085 for guilt-free spending, then you wouldn't be able to pay extra on your credit card debt. Let's see how long it would take you to pay off your credit card debt if you didn't pay any extra. Let's pull up a debt payoff calculator. You have $20,000 in credit card debt, and I don't know your interest rate, so I'm going to guess that it's 20%. If you paid $535 per month, it would take you 5 years to pay it off, and you'd be paying close to $12,000 in interest. With this in mind, let's only allocate 5% of your net monthly income to guilt-free spending, $275. This would leave you with $810 to help you pay off your credit card debt. Let's see how long it would take you to pay it off if you paid $810 extra per month. Let's pull up a debt payoff calculator again. You have $20,000 in credit card debt. We'll say the interest rate is 20%. If you paid $1345 per month, it would take you 18 months, a year and a half, to pay it off. And you'd be paying about $3,300 in interest, saving you almost $9,000 in interest. This seems like a reasonable amount of time to pay it off while still investing 10%, saving 5%, and spending 5% guilt-free. After 18 months, your credit card would be paid off, and your fixed cost would be $3,050, 56% of your net monthly income. And your emergency fund would be $4,950, which would be about a month and a half of expenses. And since your credit card is paid off, you now have $1,350 freed up to spend on other things. What could you do with it? You could increase your fixed cost percentage up to the max of 60%, $3,300, by adding $250 to that category. You could increase your investments to the max of 15%, $825, by adding $275 to that category. You could increase your savings goals to the max of 10%, $550, by adding $275 to that category. And you could increase your guilt-free spending to the minimum goal of 20%, $1,100, by adding $825 to that category. If you did all of those things, that would total $1,620. You only have $1,350, so that's not possible, but you're only short by $275. What I would do, and I don't know if Ramit would agree, I would do all of those increases, except when increasing guilt-free spending, I would only add $550 instead of $825, which would bring your guilt-free spending percentage to 15% instead of 20%. In my opinion, 15% is more than enough for guilt-free spending, given the fact that your emergency fund only covers a month and a half of expenses, and your total investments are very low for your age. In other words, I think the percentage for guilt-free spending should depend on your debt, or emergency fund, total investments, and your projected accumulation by retirement age. It's possible that Ramit would agree also, but I haven't seen any content from him about a tiered approach to the percentages. What I would like to see is some kind of conditional chart that would show a suggested guilt-free spending percentage range based on these factors. If I were to do one, it might look something like this. I would suggest that your guilt-free spending percentage would be 5% if you have any credit card debt or your emergency fund is less than 3 months. Once you pay off your credit card debt and your emergency fund is 3 months or greater, then you can move on to the next tier where you could increase your guilt-free spending range to somewhere between 6 to 15%. If your emergency fund is less than 6 months, or if you have non-mortgage debt, or the projected value of your investments by the time you retire won't cover your expenses when using the 4% safe withdrawal rate. After all those conditions are no longer true, you can move up to the next percentage range of 15 to 20% for guilt-free spending if your emergency fund is less than 12 months. Once it's 12 months or greater, then you can increase your guilt-free spending to the range of 21 to 35%. At this last tier, this is where you have no credit card debt, your emergency fund is greater than or equal to 12 months of expenses, you have no non-mortgage debt, and the projected value of your investments by the time you retire will cover your expenses when using the 4% safe withdrawal rate. Let me know your thoughts on this, and let's play this out. Let's look at your emergency fund. As I said before, it would take 18 months to pay off your credit card, by which time you would have $4,950 saved in your emergency fund. How long would it take you to save 3, 6, or 12 months of expenses? To find that out, you take your fixed costs and multiply that by 3, 6, and 12. Your fixed costs are now $3,300. 3 months of that would be $9,900, 6 months would be $19,800, and 12 months would be $39,600. You've already saved $4,950 in your emergency fund, so for 3 months of expenses, you would need to save another $4,950. For 6 months, you would need to save another $14,850. And for the 12 months, $34,650. For the 3-month emergency fund, $4,950 divided by $550 is about 9 months. For the 6-month emergency fund, $14,850 divided by $550 is about 27 months, which is about 2 years. And the 12-month emergency fund, $34,650 divided by $550 is about 63 months, which is about 5 years. Let's say the 6-month emergency fund was sufficient for now. You would reach that in about 2 years. After that, you would continue to allocate $550 to your savings goals, but some or all of that could go to other savings goals, such as saving up for a new vehicle, or a vacation, or for college funds, etc. Let's look at your student loan. Unlike Dave Ramsey, who would suggest paying off this loan along with all of your other non-mortgage debt in baby step 2, and unlike the money guys who would consider this high-interest debt because you're in your 40s and I'm assuming the interest rate is greater than 4%, my impression is that for Ramit, high-interest debt is debt that has interest rates that are between 12 to 30%, like is commonly found with credit card interest rates. And because of this, he doesn't prioritize paying off low-interest debt. So let's see how long it would take you to pay off your student loan if you didn't pay extra on it to pay it off early. Your current balance owed is $45,000. I don't know your interest rate, so let's put in 5%. If you paid $475 per month, it would take 121 months to pay it off, which is about 10 years. Your fixed costs would go down to $2,825, 51% of your net monthly income, at which point you would have an additional $475 per month to spend on other fixed costs, or you could allocate that money to other categories such as investing, saving, or guilt-free spending. Let's assume that your investments will remain at 15% of your net monthly income, and let's look at a retirement calculator to see what this investing will add up to when you reach retirement age. You started this with $25,000 in investments. You're in your early 40s, so let's say you're about 42. For 18 months, you contribute 10% to investments, $550. For the sake of this calculator, we'll round this up to 2 years. So you'll do this until you're 44. For 2 years until you're 44, you are contributing $550 per month, plus the $100 employer match, which would be $7,800 per year. With a conservative 7% rate of return, by age 44, you should have about $44,769. At which time you increased your investments to 15% of your net monthly income, $825. Let's put your expected retirement age at 65 and a 7% rate of return. You're going to contribute $825 per month plus the $100 employer match, which is $11,100 per year. And your current retirement savings are now $44,769. By age 65, without ever increasing your contribution in 21 years, you should have about $683,372. With a 4% safe withdrawal rate, that would give you about $27,334 to live off of in retirement each year. Note that if this isn't enough, then you could extend your retirement age to something like 67 or 70. Let's play out those two scenarios. If you retired at 67, you would have $805,370. With 4% safe withdrawal rate, that would give you about $32,215 to live off of in retirement. If you retired at 70, you would have $1,022,298. With a 4% safe withdrawal rate, that would give you about $40,892 to live off of in retirement. If this still isn't enough, then you could consider increasing your investment percentage to greater than 15%. Also note that if you ever get raises and you're able to increase your contributions during those years, your savings could add up to a whole lot more than that. To recap, the first and most important thing you need to do is reduce your fixed costs from 95% of your net monthly income to 60% of your net monthly income, which would reduce those costs by about $2,000. Your investments are at 5% of your net monthly income, which is below Ramit's recommended range of 10 to 15%. After reducing your fixed costs, you could set your investments to 10% while you pay off your credit card debt. Then increase your investment percentage to 15% or greater, depending on how much you need to have when you retire. Your savings goals percentage is 0%, which is below Ramit's recommended range of 5 to 10%. By reducing your fixed costs down to 60%, you could increase your savings goals to 5% while you're paying off your credit card, then increase it to 10% after it's paid off. And your guilt-free spending is currently 0%, which is below Ramit's recommended range of 20 to 35%. You could spend 5% on guilt-free spending while you're paying off your credit card, then after it's paid off, increase it to 15% or more or less depending on your investment goals and savings goals. If you do all that, your credit card would be paid off in about a year and a half, your student loan would be paid off in 10 years, your 6-month emergency fund would be completed in about 2 years, and by age 65, you should have about $683,000 saved for retirement.
Now let's do a quick comparison of the different approaches advocated by Dave Ramsey, the Money Guys, and Ramit Sethi. All three approaches stress the importance of saving up an emergency fund to cover 3, 6, or 12 months of expenses, depending on your job and household situation. Dave and the Money Guys have you focus solely on the emergency fund in certain steps of their plan, whereas Ramit has you save to your emergency fund concurrently while you save, invest, and engage in guilt-free spending. For debt, Dave has you pay off all of your debt except for your house, regardless of the interest rate, whereas the Money Guys and Ramit prioritize paying off high-interest debt. Instead of paying off low-interest debt, the Money Guys and Ramit have you invest for retirement as early as possible in order to build your wealth over a longer period of time. And unlike Dave or the Money Guys, Ramit prioritizes spending a significant percentage of your money now so that you can live a rich life both now and in the future, and be able to build the skills to spend money so that when you have millions of dollars, you will have the skills to enjoy it and spend it.
If you follow Dave Ramsey's baby steps, sequentially, your car loan would be paid off in a year unless you sold it and bought a paid-for car instead. Your credit card would be paid off a year after that. Your student loan would be paid off in 2 more years. Your 6-month emergency fund would be completed 9 months after that. And by age 65, you would have about $618,300 saved for retirement. At the beginning, you would spend nothing on guilt-free spending until about 4 years later at the end of baby step 4, when we increased this to $215 per month. If you followed the Money Guys' financial order of operations, sequentially, your credit card would be paid off in 2 years. Your car loan would be paid off 9 months later, unless you sold it and bought a paid-for car instead. Your student loan would be paid off 2 years after that. Your 6-month emergency fund would be completed in about a year after that. And by age 65, you would have about $903,600 saved for retirement. At the beginning, you would spend nothing on guilt-free spending until about 6 years later at step 8 of the FOO, when you could increase this to $100 or $200 per month, depending on how much you would want to increase any of your fixed cost expenses that had previously been reduced. If you follow Ramit Sethi's recommended spending percentages, concurrently, your car loan would disappear because selling your car and buying a paid-for one instead was one of the only ways to bring your fixed costs down close to 60%. Your credit card would be paid off in about 2 years, your student loan would be paid off in 10 years, your 6-month emergency fund would be completed in about 2 years, and by age 65, you would have about $683,000 saved for retirement. At the beginning, you would spend $275 per month on guilt-free spending while you paid off your credit card. Then you could increase this to $825 per month. If you have any comments or questions about the spreadsheets, the MoneyMonth app, or my analysis of anything, feel free to hit me up in the comments, and I'll do my best to respond to you in the comments or in a future episode. I'll put links out there for you to download those for free in case any of those look useful to you. Whether you're following Dave Ramsey's baby steps, the Money Guy's FOO, Ramit Sethi's ladder of personal finance, or your own plan, the key is finding a plan that works for you and sticking to it. And that's a wrap on another episode of Money Month. Thanks for joining. If you enjoyed the show, please like, subscribe, review, add comments, and tell your friends. If you want to play along at home, I'll add some links so you can download the spreadsheets in the desktop app. We'll be back soon with more tips, tricks, and insights to help you achieve your personal finance goals. Until then, keep learning, keep growing, and keep making every month count with Money Month.